Okay, so welcome everybody. It's my pleasure to begin our webinar, the last of this series. Next week, we will begin the 6th series of webinars of the Hebrew Universities, and this time there will be lectures not only related to the coronavirus. You can look at the invitation on our social media. So today we have the honor to host Professor MASHA, Vice Dean for Research and Development, Institute of Biochemistry, Food Science and Nutrition at the Hebrew University Faculty of Agriculture. She will give a lecture on smell and taste changes in COVID-19 and other respiratory diseases, research in the age of social media. Professor Niv's researches focus on rational modulation of biological function and in facilitating innovative design of tastants, taste modulators, and drugs. After the lecture, you are welcome to ask any question by raising your digital hand or by writing the question in the chat. So, Professor Niv, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mara, and thanks to everyone joining us today. So I'll talk about smell and taste changes in COVID-19 and other diseases, about how we're doing this research in the age of social media. But before talking about COVID-19, let me just introduce briefly our lab and the research that we usually do. So we are very interested in taste. In fact, taste is a key factor in food choice and food consumption, as well as compliance with drugs. So drugs, for example, that are very, very disgusting or very, very untasty are problematic for pediatric and mental patients. In the recent years, it became clear that receptors for taste are expressed not only on the tongue, but also in different tissues in our bodies. And therefore, they have additional physiological roles that we are exploring. And on top of all that, there are also questions related to evolution. So how taste evolved for particular species within their environment, which they need to check and to decide what to eat and what not to eat. And even beyond that, we have recently contributed to a study which showed that the receptor for vision in fruit fly, so the receptor that typically is used for vision, in fact, can be activated also by bitter taste molecules, which kind of maybe suggests that taste evolutionary preceded vision. So it's a very old kind of sense. So in the non-COVID era or pre-COVID era, what we are doing is looking at bitter molecules. We have developed a bitter DB database of bitter compounds. And because we know which molecules, which compounds have bitter taste, we can also use chemical structure now in order to classify molecules for either bitter or non-bitter. There is a paradigm saying that the role of bitter taste is to alert us against toxicity. But actually, it is not completely based on quantitative information. So what we did using the bitter predict was to predict bitterness of toxic molecules. And in fact, we were able to show that the relation between bitterness and toxicity is not as strong as was previously suggested. But we don't only care about bitter taste, we also like sweet taste and sweeteners. And we are using computational methods to predict new sweeteners with the hope of having larger repertoire of non-caloric sweeteners in the future. So we work using computational tools, using cell-based assays, but also with human subjects. And for example, we recently showed that taste can have an effect on mood. So rinsing your mouth with bitter molecules or bitter solution, for example, can raise or elicit negative emotions. So I hope I convinced you that taste is extremely important and interesting. And here is a picture showing the basic taste modalities. So the bitter, sweet, sour, salty. The taste of fat is something that has recently been established as really a taste on its own, or being established. And then umami, or the taste of monosodium glutamate, as some of us may know it, or savory taste. But actually, this is not the whole picture, because in order to really perceive the flavor of food, it's not just the molecules that we taste on our tongue. There are also volatile molecules that we breathe through our nose, and also get through retronasal olfaction here. So when chewing, part of the molecules are released into our mouth, and then we sense this retronasaling. And this together with additional factors that I will mention later, this together gives actually the sense of flavor. So each one of us probably has experienced the situation when being sick, having blocked nose, not being able to smell, and then because of that, not really tasting the food to the full normal experience. So when the nose is blocked, we do not perceive the food flavor well. Okay, so when around March, reports of sudden smell loss in COVID-19 patients started to appear, at first I noticed that, but did not pay a lot of attention. But then there was an article in the Haaretz newspaper, in an Israeli newspaper, where some of the patients actually were MD doctors themselves, told about their experience during being sick with COVID-19, so during their disease. And one of them, Dr. Liram, said, most obvious thing that recurs is loss of smell and loss of taste. And then actually my husband showed to me the newspaper, and then I said, okay, I have to see what's going on there. And I actually was able, through another columnist in the same newspaper, to get the telephone of Liram, and I talked to her, and she introduced me to other patients whom she knew, who actually said they lost their sense of taste. And after interviewing this person and understanding that really it was the taste itself that disappeared, I decided that something has to be done. I need to understand better what's going on. So from this point, a little less than over a month ago, I started looking into that. And so, of course, there are lots of questions that we might want to ask. First of all, how is taste and smell loss, how often does it occur in COVID-19 patients versus patients with other diseases? How is it different for demographics? Is it more for women or for men, for older or younger? And how can we use it for diagnosis? If we really understand it well and we understand how it differs from other diseases, maybe we can use it for well, not me, because I'm not a medical doctor, but we can provide the tools for better diagnosis. And also, better understanding may help us get clues for the mechanisms. So actually, how does it happen? What happens to the taste? What happens to the smell? Why does it happen? And of course, one very important question that a lot of patients are asking is how these symptoms are related to the onset of disease and also to recovery. So if you still don't have your smell, does it mean that you have not fully recovered, or what's going on? So many questions. And we're exploring this in two directions. One direction, which I will not go into today, is collaboration with Hadassah Medical Center, with doctors and medical students there. We have started this research with in-depth interviews and follow-ups with patients. But I don't have I will not present the story today. I will present a parallel research that we have started. And this is a global, worldwide research on sensory loss or change related to COVID-19. And it started actually, well, I mean, I was not the only one, obviously, paying attention to the symptoms. So in fact, many chemosensory scientists who usually study smell and taste, got really interested in this phenomenon. And in fact, and here's one thing about social media. So a colleague of mine tweeted something on Twitter and said, wow, this is really interesting. Maybe we should get together and start looking into this phenomenon of changes in smell and taste in relation to COVID-19 and maybe also in other illnesses later on. And so from this moment, in I think 24 hours, lots of people got together, lots of scientists and also patient advocates. And within 2 or 3 days, I think we have established the Global Consortium for Chemosensory Research. So this is a picture of one of our leadership meetings with people from US, UK, Germany, Turkey, and from Israel, myself. But this is just the leadership team. In fact, the number of scientists and clinicians and patient advocates that is involved currently in Global Consortium for Chemosensory Research that we call GCCR is huge. We have about 500 members, and you can see on the map here the different places they're coming from. And so there are around 50 countries now that are involved, because the pandemic is worldwide and everybody wants to understand the symptoms that relate to that. So what we have as a first endeavor of this consortium, what we have started is an online questionnaire where we aim to understand what is going on with the chemosensory, so the smell, taste, and related symptoms with this disease. And so basically what we are asking the people who would like to participate in this questionnaire is to describe or to rank how their senses are doing now during the disease compared to how they felt before. So how was your test of sense before you got sick, and how is it now? And we asked about ability to smell and ability to taste, and also nose blockage, right? Because we want to know whether these symptoms are related to just blocked nose, or is it something else? And I can already tell you that it's not related to blocked nose. So the phenomena that people are describing have nothing to do with their nose being blocked. In addition to the general changes, general change in the ability to sense the taste of the sense of taste, we also asked people to mention particular taste modalities, taste qualities that were changed during their illness. So here on the bottom you can see the umami taste, and this is maybe one of the reasons, or how it will be interesting in the near future to compare people from different countries, because umami taste is something very common and very clear for the Japanese and other Asian countries and cultures. But to translate this to languages such as Hebrew or Arabic or Russian, it actually is not possible. The word does not exist, and people do not necessarily even know or identify this taste, even though there is a particular receptor for this particular taste. So this is one of the reasons of comparing, why we want to compare across many cultures. So I told you before that taste and smell work together to create the flavor of food that we're feeling. But actually, they're not alone. There is an additional sense, which is called kinesthesis. And this is basically the burning, cooling, tingling, irritation sensation that can be elicited, for example, by so spicy peppers, chili peppers, or cooling of menthol, or tingling or irritation of carbonation. Sorry?
Masha, I think we missed one sentence because
Yes.
the internet was unstable. So
Okay.
if you can go back a few sentences. Yes, from here.
From here or previous slide?
From here.
Okay. So the smell and taste are actually still only part of the story of how we perceive flavor of food. And the additional partner in this triangle is a sense that's called kinesthesis. And this is the sense that of burning, cooling, tingling, irritation sensations that we have in the mouth. And interestingly, this is differently from regular taste like sweet or bitter. This does not have to happen necessarily on the tongue. You can feel it also on your cheeks. So this is more so it's an additional sensation actually. So how the spicy hot chili peppers are felt, or the cooling of menthol candies, or the irritation or touch that we feel from carbonation, like from soda water. This is this additional sense, and that was not studied before, but we are studying this with the GCCR is an additional component of the sensation of food. So the first snapshot of results is based on about 4,000 people who have answered a questionnaire and reported that they are COVID-19 positive, either from a lab-based test or from clinical assessment. And from these results, we already know that the three senses, taste and smell and kinesthesis, work together. And we also know, as I mentioned before, that it is not the blocked nose that does something to our smell. And we also know that particular taste modalities, so the salty smell or the bitter smell, the sweetness, they're all reported to be affected by, for those people who had experiencing change in taste. But the study is not over, it's just beginning, because while we took the first snapshot of the data and started analyzing it, in parallel, we have been translating with wonderful teams of translators from the GCCR members to many languages. So currently there are almost 30 different languages which are available in which one could take the survey. We have already about 30,000 respondents from about 20 different countries. And here's where we really want your help. We still want many more respondents, so everybody actually can contribute to this by forwarding this link, and Mara could forward the link to you because I sent it before via email.
Yes, sure. I wrote it right now in the chat.
Okay, thank you. So in my title, I mentioned that I will pay particular attention to research being carried in our social media age. So one thing is that the GCCR, this consortium, actually started from this, spike of interest on Twitter and scientists that came together and established this consortium. The questionnaire itself is being shared via social media, though I must say that regular media helps a lot. This questionnaire has been reported already by many traditional, so newspapers and TV and so on. And every time there's such a report, we see lots of responders. This also means, though, that some biases are inherent to this kind of research. So, for example, if we are called the Global Consortium for Chemosensory Research, and chemosensory means chemical senses, so taste and smell, kinesthesis. and we are asking questions. So to begin with, clearly some interest in this chemosensory field is inherent in those who are answering our questionnaire. And also the way the questionnaire is promoted on Twitter can be, have you recently lost your taste of smell, something like that, right? So of course, the people who answer to the questionnaire are already people who have some issues probably, or more than on average with taste and smell. And so we can answer many questions, but we cannot, using this approach, answer the question of how prevalent is chemosensory loss or impairment of taste and smell for COVID-19. We cannot ask this because our respondents are not necessarily representative of the general public. Another thing to mention is that sometimes people have very aggressively kind of used, not necessarily related to our research, but others have been kind of aggressive about promoting this issue of loss of smell or anosmia, it is called, as a marker of COVID-19. And this is also problematic because actually people can lose their sense of smell due to other reasons, not necessarily COVID-19. So some caution has to be taken, both because it is not correct to assume that necessarily loss of smell has something to do with that. And so the messages have to be really correctly and carefully and precisely formulated messages about this disease. But in the last slides, what I would like to show you is a kind of different angle that we took about social media and taste and smell and COVID-19. And this is the following question. We wanted to know whether digital media can be monitored for particular search words to help monitor the spread of the disease. And I'll explain what I mean. Recently, there was a paper in New York Times which showed that Google searches for loss of smell align very well with the number of new coronavirus cases. And here you can see a graph where the popularity of search of loss of smell was plotted against the number of positive cases per 1,000 people here on log scale in different states in the US. And you can see this report showed a very strong correlation between searches for loss of smell and number of new number of cases of people sick with coronavirus, with COVID-19. So when we looked at that, we said, okay, that's interesting. And first of all, let's see whether we can reproduce it and whether the same picture would appear also if we look for taste loss, because the New York Times only looked for smell loss. And we did that. And indeed, we also saw a correlation between searches for either taste loss or smell loss and the number of new cases in the US. We repeated this also for Italy, and here are the different counties were plotted with the number of new cases in that county on the y-axis and the number normalized and the number of popularity of searches for taste on the left and for smell loss, taste loss and smell loss on the right. So we said, okay, so the same picture appears with taste loss and it seems to be consistent in the US and in Italy. And then I saw this. This is a report from April 15th and CNBC. And what it says is, Goldman says, fewer loss of smell Google queries suggest better COVID outlook. And here below, Goldman Sachs is optimistic that recent public safety measures to contain the spread of the coronavirus are working based on Google searches for loss of smell. And then I thought, okay, this is too much. You know, I mean, we really have to be a little bit more careful than that. And so what we decided to do is look how this correlation, right? Because this prediction is based on the idea that there is a very strong correlation between the number of searches for a loss of smell and the number of new patients. And indeed, there were reports, as I showed you before, from New York Times and from our own lab. Indeed, sometimes you see a very good correlation, but the question is whether it holds over time. How does it behave? How does it behave? So we looked at correlation over time, and what we saw that it varies. So I'm showing here on top the correlation between, based on a graph like I showed before, for the different counties in different states. So we have here either just COVID-19 symptoms in general shown in purple. We have in orange the taste loss surge. We have in green the smell loss surge. And then in a second, you'll see also hearing and sight loss surge. In Italy, there were not enough such searches, so I'm not showing this. Well, you'll see it in a second when I show you also the US graph. But first, we can look at it, and what we see is that indeed, these are different weeks. You can see weeks in March till April, so 8 different weeks. And indeed, you can see that some weeks show very strong correlation between these searches and the number of new cases of coronavirus. However, this is, and here are the general symptoms of COVID-19 symptom search, which is not so high. It becomes a little higher with time, but you can see that actually this correlation goes down and down, and here it's around 0 or even negative. And if we look at the US, again, in some weeks, there is a strong correlation, but then it goes down, and then in the end, it's basically, again, close to 0. So, and here you can see that hearing and sight loss that we used as a control indeed have low correlation all the time. But what we see here is that the correlation between searches for taste loss or smell loss with new cases of coronavirus is not something that is stable over time, and it decreases. And actually here, we can see in the US, we can see the number of, so here this is now taken over all the country, not different states. We just look at the US in total, and we looked at different weeks again, and we can see that the number of new cases of coronavirus here in black, we can see it rising. By the way, the week of April 15th, it's fluctuating, but it's not really going down a lot. And we see in strong color trends as we saw before for smell loss and taste loss, but now in this gentle green and yellow, we see the media impact. So actually what we see here, that there is a beautiful correlation in the US between the number of searches that people have searched for smell and taste loss and the media coverage of this phenomenon. So we can't really, and at the same time, the number of cases is also rising, but actually it is hard to discern whether the people were looking for taste and smell loss because it was their own symptoms that they felt, or because the media was telling this really interesting story that people cannot smell, they cannot taste, they put something in their mouths and they have no idea what they're tasting. So we see that definitely there is an impact of media coverage. But maybe even more interestingly, this dies down. So there is this peak, and then we get a baseline which is higher than before the disease started, but it is quite low. So people do not search for it that much. And in Italy, we have a slightly different situation because there the number of cases started to rise and the searches for taste and smell were rising in correlation with that. Before the media, here again at this gentle green and gentle yellow, the media coverage in Italy arrived later. So we can definitely see that there was genuine interest, probably due to people's own symptoms, that caused the rise in the popularity of searches for taste and smell. However, also in Italy, with time, the number of searches goes down. So basically, what we're seeing is the situation where, if we look now only at searches in Italy and in the US, and we here I'm showing the news coverage starting. So we see in this region, at least in Italy, definitely interest due to self-symptoms because there's still no media coverage. Definitely taste loss and smell loss go together. We can see the orange and the green lines, they really go together. And this is in agreement with what we are seeing in our other studies, that the impairment of these two senses are going together, are aligned, happen often to the same person even. But in general, what we see this surprise rise stage, and this surprise rise can be either because the person feels the symptoms or because the media raises awareness and it's something interesting and people search for it. But then we have the knowledge saturation. So after a while, even though the cases are still numerous, the new cases are still numerous, people don't search so much for these symptoms anymore because it becomes known, right? By now, many people know that these are symptoms of COVID-19. So there is less motivation to search for them online. In fact, today, the taste and smell loss as COVID-19 symptoms have been introduced by the CDC and by the World Health Organization. So people do not search for them as much as before. And therefore, it is important to understand that searches online are no longer reliable markers. So if the searches are going down, it does not mean that the new cases of the disease are going down as well. So here we have this interesting situation where taste and smell have become known symptoms for COVID-19, but on the other hand, so many questions still remain open. And here I would like to circle back and invite you once again to share our survey, because we do want to have many more questions about how these symptoms play together with other symptoms. Is a loss of taste and smell somehow preceding or following other symptoms? What about severity of disease and so on in respect to these symptoms? So still a lot of things to be answered. So I would like to just show here my team, my wonderful students, all of them doing great work. In black color here, I highlighted those who have been working on the COVID-19 related topics. So Kim and Fabrizio have done the Google Trends or the Google searches analysis, and Hadar is working both with Hadassah Hospital and with the GCCR with the questionnaire to COVID-19 and other respiratory diseases patients. We have also collaborated with Yuli Slavutsky on the searches project, and she's part of the Center for Interdisciplinary Data Science Research of the Hebrew University. And I would like to thank our funding. This is our beautiful Faculty of Agriculture, the Faculty of Agriculture, Food and Environment, which I hope when the pandemic is over, everybody can visit. I think this is a good time to start taking questions.
Thank you very much. So we can start, you can raise your hand. Here we have let me see. Okay, Joseph Oscar. So Yossi, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. Thank you very much for your explanation. So, from what I have understood, it looks like the correlation is not entirely stable, and many of the factors are subjective. And also, I would like to ask you whether you have noticed that the virus somehow lost its aggressivity, and this also has an influence on the results of the research.
I don't. So definitely, there are many factors. So in the Google search project, there are many factors that influence the popularity of different searches. And our main conclusion here is that one has to be careful looking at new symptoms and to understand that when symptoms becomes not so new, these searches, these digital searches are not as reflective of people sick with the disease. And this is something general that not only for taste and smell loss. There are some other symptoms that people are starting to share related to COVID-19, like there's COVID toe and the other more rare symptoms. And I just want to caution also for this. It is definitely, there is a period, there is a window of time when something is really new and people start to notice it, and it might lead to more searches on digital media, but with time when it becomes known, it is known. So people don't search for that so much. I wouldn't say that it has to do something with severity of disease. No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Can you state that it is possible to have a diagnosis of COVID-19 based on loss of taste and smell?
No, I would say that it is not enough. There is not enough data, and also it is not a yes or no situation, because there are people who test negative for COVID-19, but nevertheless have taste and or smell loss. So this can happen for people who are not sick with COVID-19. It's not as often, but it can happen. So this is why it is very important to have a whole list of symptoms and to understand which symptoms go together more often and so on, in order to help diagnosis. So on one hand, if somebody loses taste or smell, especially during this period, of course you have to be very careful, because there is a high chance that you have the disease. But it is not a definitive answer. So you have to, it raises suspicion, but there are like 10% or something like this of people, or even sometimes higher, who test negative for COVID-19. This is not from our study, it's a different, smaller study, but there is percentage of people with similar or impairment of taste or smell, and it's not COVID-19. So yes, it's a suspicion, but it's not directly diagnosis.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And now we have a question from Doron Wolf.
Hello, good evening. So
Good evening.
the question is, you mentioned that the smell and taste loss are not connected to blockage of nose. So can you suggest why are people losing their smell and their taste, or is there a mechanism or something that you understand that COVID-19 is causing, that cause taste loss?
Thanks for your question. So there's actually no clear answer yet. There are some hypotheses, ideas. It could be affecting the nerves that innervate these systems. It could be affecting the blood vessels. It could affecting the immune system related to immune cells related to these systems. So there are ideas of what could be going on based on where the ACE2 is expressed, but it is currently unknown. And one of the reasons that we really want to understand which specific tastes are, or all of them, or only some of them are affected, and whether kinesthesis is affected, or whether you experience phantosmia, like imaginary smells or not. All of these questions can give clues about what's going on, whether it's a neurological or something in the brain, or peripheral, so closer to the organs, to the sensory organs.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have now from the chat a few questions. What is the purported mechanism of taste loss from COVID?
Yeah, so that's a similar question that I was asked before. So I will not answer against it. So there are several, as I said, several ideas, and has to be investigated. So it's not known yet.
Okay, and Beno Michel, he's asking, any relation of loss of smell and taste and Alzheimer?
Neurological disorders can be related, but this is a different story, so not related to COVID-19. Maybe I will, there were some questions that people sent before, and based on that I actually wanted to highlight something that is not directly related to my research, but I would like to mention this because it's important for patients. So people who have lost their sense of smell, it has a huge effect on their well-being, and it can be very depressing, and especially it is not always known how long it will take. So actually there are examples of several weeks, long weeks, that people have been suffering from smell loss. So I would just invite those who experience something like that to visit. So there is a Facebook that's called COVID-19 Smell and Taste Loss, which is run by Chrissy, who is one of the Chrissy Kelly, who is one of the GCCR leadership members, and she's a patient advocate, and she's running this Facebook group. So there you can kind of learn about, if you have this, if somebody has it, learn how people have coped with this, what they experience. People ask each other questions, what they feel, how long it takes till it passes, and so on. And in addition, not related only to COVID-19, there are techniques for smell training. So people who have lost their sense of smell can do smell training, which you can think of as like physiotherapy for the nose. So if you lose it, but you kind of gradually train it back to become sensitive to smell again. And this again, you can do through Chrissy's Absent.org. So yeah, okay.
Okay, we have another question from Yuri Estrin. He's saying there are some researchers who claim that loss of taste and smell is not a symptom of COVID-19. Do you try to approach them and debate with them? Does a forum for such a debate exist?
I think by now it is not really a question whether it happens or not. I mean, in the beginning, some people were skeptical. When I started discussing this, I really had like a kind of very, you know, like people saying, wow, it's clear, you get sick, your nose is blocked, what's new about it, like you're talking about. So I have a couple of such responses. But right now, actually, it is so clear that something is going on, that the World Health Organization has added this as symptoms, and the CDC has added as less common but symptoms of COVID-19. So I think really by now it's well established that these are symptoms. How strong they are, how prevalent these symptoms are for COVID-19 as opposed to other viral respiratory diseases. This is something that still needs to be clarified, because other viral diseases have been reported actually to have smell loss, which also was not due to blocked nose. So some viral damage to the smell system was reported, but not at all to the extent that the current virus is doing. So I would say, but right now it is already established, the connection is established, but the details need to be investigated.
Okay, Stephen Sloan, you can speak now and you can ask your question. You need to open your microphone.
Thank you very much. I'm an ear, nose, and throat doctor in San Francisco, and I apologize I missed a portion of the program. Did you talk at all about the prognosis for and the time course of recovery of loss of smell and taste after COVID infection?
So in our study, we have not yet, we have a follow-up of patients, and we will have the answer from that in due time, but right now we still don't have this answer. However, based on what we have now on the screen, actually, this Facebook group for patients, looking at what they have experienced there, it can be 4-7 days, but some people are reporting 40 days and so on. So it can take a long time. But I actually would like to invite you, if you would like, to join the GCCR, because clinicians are very welcome to participate. So if you would like to email me afterwards, we have many partners who are clinicians, and I would love you to use the questionnaire also to encourage your patients to participate in that.
Of course. Is there, I know this is all anecdotal, but is there any role for topical nasal steroids or anticholinergics for loss of olfaction? Is there any role for nasal saline?
You mean to treat it?
Correct.
To help it?
Right.
I'm trying to think. I don't think. Well, first of all, we have not yet analyzed the data all the data that we have, but as far as I know, it is not. No, I would not say that there is any treatment that is clearly, that one could say, okay, you do this if that's what your patient has. I don't think right now it is clear what to do.
Toda rabba.
Toda.
Okay, so we have time for one more questions. If you want, you can raise your hand again or write it on the chat. Okay, so I think there are no more questions for this evening. And
all right.
Thank you very much, Professor Niv. It was, as usual, very, very interesting. And thank you to all of you. Hope to see you on Sunday for the next webinar and another very interesting lecture. Thank you to everybody.
Professor Niv, תודה רבה, היה מאוד מעניין.
תודה רבה. Thank you. Thanks, Mara, for organizing. Bye-bye. Stay safe and healthy.
Bye.